Now we're going to have the gospel, the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Then they arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As he stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house, but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demons into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside, a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherders saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened. And when they came to see Jesus, they found the man for whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The gospel of our Lord.
Praise be to you, Christ.
Thank you, Mike, and a big thank you to our mental health ministry team for the ongoing work. And as he mentioned, this actually, the work spawned out of some research that had been done in our local school district that said, yes, there is a rise among all young people, and especially in Lake Travis ISD, there seem to be higher rates of things that would give us cause for the mental health and well-being of our young people. And we said, that seems, it seems like Jesus would care about that, really, was kind of the end of that. And part of the way that we get, that feeling, some of where that impulse comes from of Jesus cares for our mental well-being, right? A lot of it comes from the entire ministry of Jesus and his modality to bring wholeness. When Jesus comes and heals, he often heals in ways that aren't just healing a physical malady, but are healing social connections and concerns and boundaries, that are healing people spiritually and forgiving sins, and ways that are indeed healing people's mental well-being as well. So Mike asked to not only be able to share some of the work that our mental health ministry team was going through, but also this particular text as our gospel reading. And some of that, you heard at the beginning of Mike's story how often people with mental illness were viewed and treated among society, even within his lifetime. Well, the same is true in the life and world of first century Near East that Jesus lived and moved in. And so, in fact, you heard some ways that might be, some things that might be pretty similar. And as psychiatrists have looked and read this text, they say, you know what, this sounds like potentially, yes, we hear in the text this is a demonic possession, but it also seems to be manifesting itself in ways that might lead us to think about mental illness and well-being, right? So this man has been engaging in self-harm, and a lot of the response of the community as he has been sort of like screaming in terror and all this was to take him out of town and lock him up with the other unclean things, like the cemetery and the pigs, because that's not something we want to deal with. That's not someone we want to deal with. And what they do then is they create this dividing wall, like we hear about in Ephesians, right? Where there's like, well, there's all of us here in the town, and sure, there's, that one over there. There's him, there's them. And if we can lump them in with the other things that we're not supposed to care too much about and pay too much attention to that are sort of unclean, right? Then maybe we can feel like we are keeping ourselves clean and together. Well, Jesus, interacts with this man and also with the legion of demons that is plaguing him. And as is always interesting, the demons seem to be more keenly aware of who Jesus is at this point in the story than even the disciples and those that are traveling with him. They address him, Son of the Most High God. They recognize the power and authority that he has when so often so many have been missing it up to this point, that here is God with them in their midst. And so Jesus interfaces with them. And when he exorcises these demons, when he brings healing and wholeness, it is not as simple as a casting out of the demons. It is not on itself in one aspect alone. But the community needs to be brought back together. That dividing wall that they have placed up by placing the man on the margins, where they can avoid him and not talk about him and kind of pretend like he doesn't exist, needs to be broken down. In fact, to the point where when this man is ready to follow Jesus at the end of the story, Jesus reminds him that his calling is there among his people. There is more social restoration that needs to take place among the people as they care for this person whom they have been called to care for, and yet their response was, let's move him away. And sure, they were worried, right? You would be worried too if someone was causing themselves and potentially others harm. And sometimes things manifest themselves in that way. And yet they have been called to care for this person, to love their neighbor as they love one another, as they love themselves. And so these last few weeks, right, we're in week 4 of this series called Traveling Light. And sitting with that question of kind of what do we really need to take with us as we move forward together into what God has in store for us? And what might we need to leave behind? And when we consider those questions, right, what do we take with us and what might we need to leave behind? Some of our answers are tangible things. Right? Some of it's like stuff that you don't, I've used things like a really old piece of luggage that might have great sentimental value but isn't very practical to travel with, right? Some of it's like real stuff. Or last week I talked about passports and itineraries, and in my head I'm talking, a physical kind of thing. But they also have this deeper meaning and understanding in the same way that I made the claim that God has given you a passport because God has placed the seal of the Holy Spirit on you. Some of our stuff is more of a metaphorical answer, right? And yet the weight of those things is no less real. Some of the weight that sits upon us, the things that make it hard to travel light throughout the day, the things that bend us over and keep us burdened. Among those things, I think perhaps some of the heaviest deal with our mental health and wellness. Those are heavy weights to bear. Whether it is your own mental health, that is lacking or that of a loved one. The weight of these things is really heavy, and it doesn't get any lighter when we continue to view mental illness issues differently than physical health issues and concerns. When we instead think that struggling with your mental health must be significantly tied to some sort of moral or sometimes spiritual failure, a lack of faith, when we don't, one of the things when we go to these mental health ministry trainings that are put on by groups like NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, they talk about the difference between how we often respond when our neighbor has a physical health need or concern or crisis Let's get some food over there. Let's get them a ride to where they need to go. Let's help out with some household chores and all these things. And the ways that we often as a society, and indeed sometimes as churches too, fail to live into the same thing when somebody has a mental health concern. There aren't as many offers of meals and rides. And sometimes that's because we tend to bear those things alone, which also makes them heavier when we bear the weight of them alone. But we get afraid to share and talk about what it is like. And you know what's interesting? When we do all of these things, and what I have found often, at least has been true for myself, is that when I think of people experiencing mental health concerns or issues, I often think of other people rather than myself. But I shared a couple months ago now about how in this last year I had like a couple panic attacks, and reached out to a doctor to figure out kind of like what is this thing that I'm feeling and all in this tightness and all of this that I can't kind of shake, and it was this reminder. Too, as Mike shared, there are these new statistics, these things that we're learning about how this last 16 months has really weighed on all of us. And even before this pandemic, 20% of people would experience a significant mental health challenge or crisis in their life. 1 in 5. And some studies think that that at least 50% of the United States experienced some form of depression last year. As high as 50%, half of us had at least some of the symptoms of depression this last year. That's a heavy weight for yourself and for others, and it's a really heavy weight when you think of, this shouldn't happen to me. I've got everything going right in life. I don't have as many stressors as somebody else. I had a great experience growing up and being in school. All of these things that can then turn us in and to ourselves. When we sit in ourselves, those burdens are heavy. Rather than when we share them with Jesus and with one another, we find that the burden of Christ is light. So we create these dividing walls, even for ourselves. That's something that happens to them, not to us, not to me. Something that goes on with her and not me, and him and not you. It's something that only happens to them. It's an inability to see ourselves in these ones that we have called other. And yet, I think that's, maybe that's something that we miss in the message of Jesus. Yet Paul makes it so clear in our Ephesians text today that these places where we ourselves, right? He talks about circumcision being, like a physical one done by human hands. That these divisions that we create among ourselves are being broken down by Jesus as Jesus creates one new humanity. Where every place that we look, where there's an us and a them, Jesus breaks down that wall, pulls us together, and doesn't just put two groups side by side, but creates out of the two one new humanity. And so when we think about things, whether it be mental illness or really anything that would set us up of that happens to them and not to me, we're forgetting this new humanity, where every them is broken down and there is an ever-increasing all of us. So when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, he's reminding you that you and your neighbor are a lot more the same thing than you think you are. And if there's one thing that this last 16 months or so has really taught us, at a global scale, we are so connected. We are so connected and close to each other. So I invite you to look for these ways that Jesus continues to make out of our groups and divisions one new humanity called together that includes those that we have so often previously pushed to the margins, that leaves behind thoughts of that can't happen to me, and if it can't happen to me, then I'm not going to care about it, and that leaves behind a stigma about mental illness that says, oh, that's not something that we talk about, that's not something that we bring forward, that's not something that we can share with others or bear with one another. And instead moves forward and says, just like Jesus, that the church might be the body of Christ saying, come unto me, you who are weary and heavy laden. Come and share your burdens that we might bear them together. So you might find a yoke that is easy and a burden that is light, so that this journey of following Christ, of being one new humanity, might help us to travel light through life. Amen.